might not know me, I'm your mayor, Donna Holiday, and it's a pleasure to be here. I know that probably 2 years ago, we tried to pull together an ad hoc group under a former deputy director of the highway department, and had 1 or 2 meetings. John Eric and the engineering team who are here, John Eric White, Diane Gagnon, and Nick. Federico, sorry, Nick, it just went out of my head. This is our amazing engineering team. John Eric leads the staff, and Nick is our stormwater engineer, which is wonderful. So I know that people on the west side, particularly in the Turkey Hill neighborhoods, have been asking for quite some time for some relief, some safety, some increased ability to get from that inn along Hale Street to Low Street, kids to school, etc. And it creates tremendous challenges for us, not only in terms of the financial cost, but because of the conditions on Hale Street in terms of ledge and wetlands, and the list goes on and on. But I believe that Livable Streets is an incredibly creative team, and Rick approached me, Rick Tainter, and asked me if I would be willing to let Livable Streets sort of take on this ad hoc group, because I can only run so many in the course of a given week, even though I do make efforts to try and bring neighborhoods together. I'm very grateful that Livable Streets is stepping up to work with you and our engineering team to see if we can advance this important initiative for the community. We have our Tony from Merrimack Valley Planning Commission just walked in, and that's also a good sign. Also a big transportation and networking person, so hopefully we can offer some good ideas also. Hi, Molly. But I also did want to recognize 2 of our city councilors who are here, Jim McCauley, who is our Ward 5 councilor, and Heather Shan, who is, can you stand up, because some people might not know you yet, and Heather Shan, who is our Ward 3 councilor. Thank you. I think that I'm going to turn it over to Rick, and then to, I think, John Eric is going to walk you through some updated slides. Please forgive me as I slip out the back. I have my State of the City Thursday night and have a little bit of work to do on that presentation, and it's an important one for the city. So I will catch up with Rick and John Eric and make sure that I have an updated results of your meeting today, and thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And again, my apologies that it's taken a while for us to really regroup and move this initiative forward. But I think we have the right people in the room to begin, looking at how we can advance work in this area of the city. So I will turn it over to Rick Tainter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Again, I'm Rick Tainter. I'm one of the members of Newburyport Livable Streets, and we have our core group right here in the front. Ben Iacona, Alvin Clark, Julia Walker, Sheila Tainter. There are many others. Just so you know, we're a group that is a citizens group, sort of an informal group, but we do meet monthly on the first Tuesday of the month in the library, at the children's room of the library. And we would welcome anybody to come. We have a lot of things that we want to get done, and we're kind of limited by the number of bodies. At the back of the room, if you didn't see it, we have a sign-up list if you want to be on our email list. You can also find us on Facebook, where we announce our meetings every month. Some of the projects we're working on, just very briefly, we were very much involved. Actually, we came out of another group called Walking and Wheeling Newburyport, which was very instrumental in getting the High Street Safe Routes to School project underway. And so that was really one of the projects that kind of led to the formation of Newburyport Livable Streets. We also worked with the City Council and the Planning Department on developing the Complete Streets policy, and we're going to have another session sometime later this spring to talk about what Complete Streets means and how that translates into the design of streets and sidewalks and the operation of transportation infrastructure.
Rick, can you just announce that we received a $400,000
yes,
Complete
we just
Streets
received
grant?
a $400,000 grant under the Complete Streets grant program. The state has a grant program to implement Complete Streets projects, and that grant program is to help complete the last link between the 2 parts of the rail trail going along Parker Street up and getting across the intersection of State Street. And I don't know all the details of the design, but I'm sure that's going to be developed later this spring, and I think it probably is going to be going into construction this year, probably, right?
Well, we're hoping so. We have to coordinate with Mass DOT because they have finished a study on the Route 1 rotary.
Circle, yeah.
And with Howard Stein Hudson, and are looking at shifting it a little bit, and hopefully that will make it a little safer and give better visibility for coming behind the new roast beef place.
Yes.
And popping out to come across Route 1. So that's really the obstacle that we're dealing with Mass DOT, but that's a very exciting project to
Very
be able
exciting.
to finish the rail trail.
Yes. We've also been looking at ways to improve safety on Merrimack Street around Pioneer Field. One of our concerns has been sidewalk clearing in the winter, and we've been trying to look at how we might prioritize areas that aren't being cleared now, especially in the commercial areas. And another thing that we're going to be working on is a master plan for bike racks around the city. So some background on this project. As the mayor mentioned, there was she had a task force that met just about 2 years ago. And with all the other things going on in the city, it really hasn't been able to get the attention it deserves, and so that's why we're trying to step up and help with that process. And our role, we're really primarily lay people that are interested in improving bicycling and walking in the city. And our role is really to facilitate the discussion. So we're not here presenting a plan to you at this point. John Eric White will be doing a very detailed presentation after I go through some introduction to the area. Now, you all probably know the road much more than I do, especially its problems, but just looking at a map, you can see that Hale Street is one of only 2 ways to get into the downtown, and it's really the only potential walkable bicycle route to get to the downtown and to the schools from the west end. So this is the area we're looking at. It's basically 1.7 miles from Turkey Hill Road at the bottom of the map to Low Street to the top. One of the interesting things is we have this developing system of trails, or network of trails, in the four-town coastal trails area. And the system includes off-road trails, which are shown in blue, and then possible on-road bicycling routes. And you can see that on this map that Hale Street is the way to get from the west end into the downtown area. Obviously, we're not going to promote 113 as a primary route especially for kids. The route has a real variety of environments, going from the residential neighborhoods on the west side of 95, through the farmland area by the industrial park, through the Squires Glen neighborhood, up toward the school and Fuller Field up here on Low Street that are really primary attractors for going down that road. And I'm just going to take you through a very quick run through just from Google Earth and Google Street View, just kind of highlighting some of the issues along the road. The first section is really that 0.4 mile section from Turkey Hill Road to the bridge over 95. And this is an area that is the only area that really has a significant amount of sidewalk. It begins with this section with the sidewalk separated from the street with some nice trees. However, the road has really no infrastructure at all for bicycling. It's kind of constrained on the south side of the road by the guardrail and the ditch. And so whatever happens here needs to account for infrastructure in that area and how you deal with the guardrail and the ditch and so forth. I believe John Eric is going to be talking about that. As you move closer to 95, the sidewalk gets closer to the street. It's pretty narrow, very constrained by guardrails on both sides. You get up to the bridge, and that's really the best part of the road, the bridge going across 95, because you actually have a sidewalk with a curb. You've got some shoulder there, wider lanes. So it's really the best part in terms of walking and bicycling. Then as you cross the bridge, you come to the trailhead for the Gloria Brownhart Trail here, and the driveways for UFP Technologies, another 0.4 miles roughly. The sidewalk starts to get overgrown, the sidewalk disappears. You get narrower and narrower shoulders. You've got the constraint of the pond on the north side. Some wetlands on the south side. You have concern perhaps about trucks entering and exiting the industrial property. Then you get to this, I should go back for just a second. And this, one important point about this photograph is that as you pass the UPF coming into town, you come to that curve. And as many of you will know, traffic coming from town out to the west end has really poor visibility coming around that curve. If you're walking along the shoulder there or trying to bicycle, that's probably one of the dangerous places along the road. Then you get another nice straightaway. You've got a new trailhead and parking area, which isn't shown in this old image here. You've got the recreational conservation area of the North Pasture. All the way up, there's very few constraints in this area relative to some other areas until you get to the residential areas up by Squires Glen subdivision. Like you're coming along here, and you do get some, you get any kind of traffic in this area, there's really no place to move. So it's a place to be careful about. Very narrow shoulders, very beautiful, very nice country road, but very little space to maneuver as a bicyclist or a walker. And then this next section, now we're getting into smaller sections. There's a quarter-mile section here as we go through the Squires Glen neighborhood, up to the point of the beginning of the sidewalk, just past Squires Glen Drive. So again, we have multiple driveways here. This is an area where there are many school kids in the neighborhood, so an area that would be highly deserving of a better sidewalk infrastructure through here. And then getting to the industrial park. And I think that this is the point at which the traffic counts really pick up, because you have a lot of traffic that is destined to the industrial park or to I-95 via Scotland Road that kind of adds to the traffic from this point toward Rose Street. And then we come to the end of Squires Glen neighborhood, and we pick up that sidewalk. Another small section here from where the sidewalk comes up to the Port Healthcare Center and the Hope Church. Wetlands again on the north side, wetlands on the south side. And then that very last area where you've got traffic backed up from the signal and so forth, and quite a lot of traffic in this area. Bring you right up to the corner, and the crosswalk's taking you over to the schools. So that's just a very quick overview, and now I'll ask John Eric to come up and do his thing.
You guys been talking about this? Oh, no, you haven't. Thank you, sir. As the mayor was saying, I put this slideshow together during one of our ad hoc committee meetings in 2018. And the slideshow itself, it's rough and tumble, it's quick, but it gets the point across. So we used, just like Rick, we used Google Earth for the street view, and it becomes very effective. What I'm going to talk about, I just did, the first bullet. And I'm going to go into the existing conditions real quick, mainly about the road width. It's all about the road width. I'm going to run the Mass DOT design standards by you for those that aren't familiar with Mass Highway standards, Mass DOT standards. And then we're going to discuss some proposed options, and then we're going to open it up. I'll turn it back over to Rick. So Rick approached it from the west to east. I approached it from the east to west because I wanted to get home, and that's kind of how my brain thinks. So, but I do live on Crow Lane, so I live in your neighborhood. So this project, I'm not going to excuse myself from any meetings. I'm going to be a proponent of it. And I really, I'm in support, I'm in favor of it. We really need it. Outside of where I live, my professional position here, city engineer, we need it. It's not safe. As I drive to work every single day, there's sections where I see about, I think it was in December when the weather was warm, there was two young girls. They were either older middle school or younger high school, but it was dark and rainy. And it was over by the section of Squires Glen, 1,750 foot text. And I was heading to work. I couldn't even see it. And it really bothered me that they were walking, because they were giggling, you know, shooting the breeze, not paying attention. And that's, I mean, that's pretty scary, because we all have, some of us have people that we know that got hurt. So this section is just a different breakdown. Essentially what you have is you have generally 3 different types of cross sections. The first area, you know, this is more urban, right? Then you get Squires Glen, technically the traffic engineers call it a village area, but it becomes, you know, it's a transition between, you know, more urban, and then you get into rural. And then you go back to a kind of a developed rural. So this short stretch of you know, it's not a very long road, you know, it's 1.5 miles. But you do have 3 different cross sections. You talked about the access points. So when it comes to highway design, I'm a general civil engineer by trade. I have done plenty of highways, but I'm not a traffic engineer. Traffic engineer deals with numbers and ADT and traffic counts and all that. But I've had enough experience with highway design, so I'll run that by you real quick. This is Hale Street's collector. You start off leaving your house locally. I mean, this slide is it's almost exactly like Newburyport. You know, like I'm right here, this is local, you jump on Hale Street, and then you might jump on Low Street. So Low is like a minor arterial, but Hale is a collector. And for each one of these classifications, Mass DOT has requirements for widths and all that fun stuff. Enough to bore you. This is one of them right here. This is in case you didn't know it. What's the width of my car? You know, your car is probably about 7 feet wide. This is actually accurate for my car. Tractor trailers are 8.5. And the operating width, if you look at the operating width, I mean 8.5, a foot on each side only gives you a 10.5 foot lane. So when you start talking about lane widths, when you start getting down to really narrow lanes like 10 feet, that gets sketchy. So for this collector road, I don't want to go anything lower than 11 feet, and we can talk about that. So technically, Mass DOT allows you. So here are the different types. These are the different types of neighborhoods. Collectors are all 10 to 12. If this was funded by Mass DOT, which it could be, we could be funding this by Mass DOT. But Mass DOT gives you the ability and they have the minimums and maximums. They give you the ability to design as you see fit. For our road, the first section going into the industrial park has tractor trailers. So we do not want 10 feet. I don't like 10 feet for the whole thing, and we're going to get into that. You'll hear my opinion about that as it goes. So I'm going to try to have everyone in the audience, concentrate on 11-foot minimum. And one more thing. For industrial parks, a lot of industrial parks have travel lanes wider than 12 feet. So, bless you. So, the asterisk on the Mass DOT design manual has one for industrial parks. So, 12 foot's you can go beyond 12 feet. Type of shoulders, or the width of the shoulders, pretty basic. I mean, across the board, 4 to 10 feet. Obviously, you can see 4-foot min, 10-foot max. This is the usable shoulder, and then the minimum. So this is kind of a repeat. I'm probably gonna have to add this slide. But the main purpose of this slide is really the different reasons why you have a shoulder. So this is really our main reason. Yeah, a car will need to pull over, but it's mainly for mixed use. So as I said, I looked at it from leaving work. The first section here, the top view, you'll see an arrow with a circle and a number. That's where the photograph was taken. So pick 1 was taken right about here. Pick 2 was taken right about there. If you don't catch that on every slide, doesn't matter. You get the idea. Right off the bat, it's 11.3 feet wide outbound, 11.7 feet wide inbound. So that right there is an 11-foot lane, if you want to call it that, with a 0.3 shoulder. Ridiculously narrow. Same thing with 11.7. And it's going to be like this throughout the whole way. The next section is taken in between, is that Doe you guys? Yeah, in Wilkinson. So, 10.5. This is the narrowest part right here, 10.5. So 10.5 and 11.2. Picks up a little bit, 12 feet, 11.7. Just before you get to the pasture, 11.3 and 12. This particular crossing, I took out, I didn't measure to the fog line. It's not necessary for our project, for this discussion. It's only, that fog line is only a foot wide. Now, one of the driving forces of any project is the environment. So this project will have environmental issues, so we will have to submit a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. But I assure you, we're all friends with the Conservation Commission chairman,
Who lives on Hale Street. Who lives on Hale Street, yes.
I didn't say that.
I did.
Now, all kidding aside, this is serious. All kidding aside, these are not jurisdictional wetlands at the first section here. And there's definition of what a jurisdictional wetland is. I'm not going to bore you. For this first section, I do feel pretty confident that they are not. So when you talk to people and they say, oh, this road can't be widened because this is wetland, by law, we can, because we are not breaking any laws. When you get out to the pasture, right in here, I cannot say with a straight face that there's no wetlands out here. So, but I can say with a straight face that we can probably widen to the other side. So there's a million ways to skin a cat. So we can probably stay away from this wetland and then widen over there. And the only reason for saying this is I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that it's a showstopper, because I do feel confident that we can make it work. As Rick was saying, when you get to the bridge, the bridge itself is 15 and 15, so it's 30 feet curb to curb. And generally, that's what we're proposing, what we're recommending for this cross section for the whole corridor is 15 for each direction. As you know, when you get to the other side, 11 gets narrow. In here, this is a ditch, and for those that are very familiar with this, that is, this guardrail needs to be repaired. On the other side of the guardrail, or on the other side of the ditch is a stone wall. So we have to be careful with stone walls. By law, you can't relocate so many linear footage of wall. You end up triggering a MIPA finding. We don't want to go there, we don't want to touch that. But I'm trying to come up with a clever way to widen without impacting the wall. We could possibly go to a closed drainage system, but we'll worry about that in a minute. So the possible solutions, really, at the end of the day, we're here to hear any ideas that you have, because everyone has an idea and we're human. I see one option. I put a second one because you can't have a presentation with just one option. So I am open-minded. This is Mass DOT design manual that we use. So case one is everything separate. Your travel lane is separate, bikers are separate, and pedestrian. Pretty self-explanatory. When you're separated, and then if you need funding from Mass DOT, technically a bike path is 4 feet wide without a curb, but the minute you have a curb, it's got to be 5 feet wide. So those are the minimums for Mass DOT. And even Mass DOT allows a little gray area, so they call it case 2. So the gray area is case 2 accommodation may require design exceptions. Indicating that the road is shared between cyclists and motor vehicles are appropriate. Yeah, so I mean, I was trying to find the exact wording, but essentially, you know, if we get funded by Mass DOT and we do say 11 and 4, 11 foot for the travel lane and 4 feet for the bike, for the shoulder, it's not really a bike path because it's 4 feet, because we have a curb, they may do a design exception, calling it a case 2. Worry about that. Worry about putting names on our lanes. Worry about it when we get into funding. That's what I like about, for anything we do locally, the most important is safety. Classification is a lot of times dependent on who is the funding authority. But as long as it's safe, and I mean that, as long as it's safe, whether you call it a bike lane or a shoulder, but it provides the same function, I don't get hung up on names. Case 3 is shared, so this is kind of like High Street. You have the shared use of travel lane and bikers. So before you approach that, driving, you'll see a chevron, 2 arrows. That means it started to turn into that's your indication that you're turning into a shared use. Am I going too fast or too slow? Okay. Case 4 is, so this is an option that we propose. It's separate mixed use, and this is exactly what we have where there's no curb. And then we have shared for all of them. This came up, it's coming up in a lot of other countries. Rick and I talked about it at one of our meetings. It's got its purpose, but not for a collector. This will have a purpose for like a local road. Well, obviously a local road. It'll have purposes that I can't come up with an example right now, but definitely not for a Hale Street. This is a summary of all of them. And all these are in the design manual if anybody wants to go jump online. So option 1, the existing as was shown previously is very narrow. Outbound is 11.3, 11.7 inbound, and then it widens up a little bit. So we are so we're proposing 11 and 4, like I was saying, and then we'll have a curb and then a sidewalk. So I like this. 11 feet accommodates a lot of different vehicles. The 4, and the whole purpose of 11 and 4 instead of, well, how come you aren't doing 11 and 5? Well, it's all about the money. So we're trying to keep this as narrow as possible, and every foot adds a lot of money. So right now I'm starting minimum. I could have easily went to 11 and 5, and then you get yourself an official bike lane and everyone's happy, except for the city who doesn't have the money. So 11 and 4 is the minimum that we're proposing right now. And this is just what it looks like. So we went out there, we measured exactly where the photo's taken right here. At the end of these lines, we measured exactly the width of the road, exact. And then from this layout, we put it into AutoCAD. So this is actually, this is, unless we had a last minute change with some text, which we did, but this is generally very accurate. So we should be able to widen from the curb, leave the curb, put the 4-foot shoulder, 11-11, and 4-foot shoulder without moving that pole. That's the main purpose of this, is when people say, well, how much infrastructure do you have to relocate? Should be pretty accurate. Final design, we'll find out. There's also design standards for distance from, there's safe zones for outside of the shoulder before you hit an obstruction. So this, my gut feeling would be fine, Mass DOT would be fine with it for a local minor collector. It wouldn't be for an arterial, because I've already designed arterials in the top of my head. You need about 5 or 10 feet, depending on the speed. So this, we should be able to get away with it. Sounds like a detail, but if we have to move all these poles, it gets expensive. 11 here is very important because of the tractor trailers. This is pretty much saying the same thing. Keeping all this, moving out here, and trying to stay within the poles. The ditch can move. So in this area, this line right here is the right-of-way line. That one right there. And right-of-way, that's the right-of-way. When it comes to streets, the right-of-way is the property line, the public way. Right-of-way, that's the official property line for owned by the municipality. Private property is called private property, that's called the property line. This is the property line, but it's called the right-of-way. So we should be able to do everything in the right-of-way, and that's important. No takings, no permanent easements, things like that. Permanent easements to deal with it. Apparently, our initial assumptions, there's no area that I see that would cause us to have any problem with widening within the right-of-way. And that's good. Pretty basic here. So here, you split it down the center of the road. Just add, widen it to the right and widen it to the left. Pretty basic. And that can change. If we need to get, this didn't get away from the wetland. I was trying to be aggressive because I knew Joe was going to be here. But realistically, I'll take it back a sidewalk and move it over here and then push everything that way. Here, it's pretty straightforward. You just maintain the same curve. Here, this is where you work with the neighbors. So, anyone that lives in these houses, you don't have to raise your hand, you don't have to identify yourself that much, but I assume there are. Anyone that lives here, whether you know or not, your property, the right-of-way is probably further back than you thought. That doesn't mean that we're going to be sloppy and take your front yard away. That's not how we operate. We mean that for our department. We'll try to push back as far as we can into here, but the minute you start moving a wall, then you trigger MEPA, and MEPA is Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act. So it causes all kinds of problems. So that's that. The good news is, not to worry, it shouldn't be that much of a deal.
But the city can take that land without permission? Is that what you're saying?
Correct, because it's already our land. Yeah. And if this gives any of you folks heartburn, give us a call, come down to our office, we'll show you everything. If anyone, the city has a website, and the assessor's department has it's called MyMap. It's a software program, and you can see where your property is on the website. So you can be careful. Those assessor maps are rough. The property lines are rough, and I mean rough. plus or minus 5 feet, not plus or minus 6 inches. Plus or minus, like, you see a tree on your yard, and the property line assessors is over here. No, it could be over here. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's not sloppy. It's just very expensive to get very accurate property line surveys onto a public website. Option 2 is 11 and 4. It's going to be the same as option 1, all the way to Squires Glen, because we already know that we can't change it. Then further out, there's going to be no curbing. So from the double yellow to the north side of the road, it's all going to drain off. And if you remember the slide from way back, we'll have this with the speeds that we have. We need a barrier. We need a barrier to protect the users because of the speed and the use of this road. Curbing helps. That provides as a barrier. It's not. It's a little bit different for a mixed use, but it still provides. The 6-inch provides a type of barrier. The reason for this, folks, the minute you add curbing, that means you add drainage. The minute you add drainage, the price goes up because the road has to be up a little bit high so that we can get the pipe on the ground, not too high where it'll freeze in the winter. You got to get the pipe low enough. So once we have drainage, which we will have, but we tried not to with this design, but most likely it'll require a closed drainage system. Once you have drainage, once you put a curb in and you have drainage, the road's got, this particular road will probably have to come up a little bit because those ditches are so high. But I wanted to put together an option to have people see what a mixed-use path would look like. This is straight out of the manual. The X's we put in, and that's our note. The purpose of the slide is so you guys can see this. So when you have a travel lane and then shared use, you need some kind of striping, preferably some kind of, delineator or removable barrier. These aren't, they aren't going to stop a car. And everyone's starting to see these all over the world. Essentially, they're nothing but a stanchion, these plastic things. There's a million ways to skin that cat. But essentially, all this drains right off. So this is the same from Low Street to Squires Glen is the same. Here, in this section, it's the same because this is like that more of a neighborhood area where I personally felt that the sidewalk would be a better fit. So as you can see here, once you put in a curb, you need drainage. That's what the square is for catch basin, circle for a drain manhole. I know that the top of the hill is up here. It comes down. I put a basin here, 2 basins here. It'll drain here and discharge into this ditch. So this is pretty routine design. And I think this is a better look for this neighborhood with the sidewalk versus what we're about to get into with that. So this is the transition area here. Essentially what you have curbing. That thick line is curb. And the back thick line is the back of the sidewalk. So there's the sidewalk there. You transition from that cross-section to a narrower road. So over here, it's 11 and 4 with a sidewalk. But then when you get to, then when you get to here by the guardrail, it's 11 and 2. So when you go from here to here, this area, in my opinion, cannot work. Why? because a mixed use is, whether you have a yellow down the middle or not, a mixed use is two-way. You go from two-way, and you're a biker heading outbound, but here you're approaching someone heading towards you. So how does that work? It doesn't. But I wanted to show this because in the area up here, imagine that everywhere. This in and of itself would be fine if that began and ended like Low Street or Turkey Hill. But it doesn't. So I don't like this at all. This is where, once we get into design, we can get more creative, but as of right now, I don't see this working. Most bikers are gonna stay in the road, that's fine. Most bikers going the other way are gonna stay in the road. So, but the minute, there's still gonna be people that are confused, they aren't gonna know what to do, and there'll be a head on there. The other problem that I don't like about the guardrail is, the guardrail breaks up the ability of pulling over on the side of the road. How do you pull over when you got a guardrail? So this whole thing is a beautiful area, and I'm not saying people pull over and just, but look, some people do. I mean, you check things out. But if you, there's an opening there for the I think it's Jerry Matt's property. I don't know, but sorry for using names, but I think he used it for plow. He goes in there and hays the field. So he mows the grass, and this is his entrance point. So we need to maintain that. But essentially what we're doing is we're telling private property owners, hey, we're putting up a guardrail, so whatever you want to do to your property, you can. So I don't like that. I don't think that's fair. So at the end of the guardrail, how do you pull in? You pull in, and, sorry guys. You pull in, and when you pull in, you got to make sure that no one's coming this way. This is a big open, that's fine. So you can see people coming towards you that way. But when you pull in here, you're crossing a bike path just to get to the trailhead. I don't like it. I don't know what you guys think. I'm very opinionated, as you can tell, but I don't like that. So to me, it's kind of hard. And then here you go back to what I think is more appropriate. And again, this is subject to change. You guys could do it. The city could choose a shared use here. That's fine. But again, going from here to the bridge, we don't really have it shown, but going from there to the bridge, you got a bridge with so you're going from a bridge with a sidewalk to a shared use to Turkey Hill. I mean, a short stretch of shared use it's dysfunctional because you got people going both ways on the shared use, and then I don't know. So I think that it's more appropriate to have a sidewalk in this area. That is it. We didn't upload it today because I ran out of time. We'll upload it tomorrow. But essentially, this is the engineering department's sub-website. So I turn this back over to Rick.
It's really wonderful to have somebody thinking about this every morning on the way to work and every morning on the way back. So I think you probably thought about every possibility here. I think it's important to you all understand from John Eric's presentation that this isn't really a formal design yet. It's not really even a plan. There's no funding that's been assigned yet, no schedule. It's not the city's capital plan. And really the purpose here is really to present this concept and start getting feedback and other ideas. It's also important to think about the fact that this project doesn't have to be all done at once. It can be done in phases, and different funding sources can be identified. For example, the first section, the really high priority section in the Squires Glen neighborhood, extending the sidewalk down to Doe Run, That might be the first phase, and that might be done through possibly some more safe routes to school funding or something like that. And then maybe the next section from there down to the bridge might be another phase. We might be able to, the city might be able to apply for another complete streets grant to do that. So it's something that can be put together in logical phases with one section primarily sidewalk design and maybe other sections adding a path or whatever happens. And so it's renovating and updating the existing sidewalk, extending it down, and then adding pieces as funding permits. So really, it's great that so many people are here. We want to hear your ideas, any concerns you have, and also to help guide us as to what to bring back to the city in terms of proposals for adding things to the capital improvement plan and identifying funding sources. So with that, any questions or comments or concerns?
Rick, well, any comments you picked up on the recording?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to try to repeat the question so that Joe can get it. Everybody thinks it's wonderful. Yes?
Is there a rough schedule for when this would be done?
No, there isn't at this point. And so that's kind of really the purpose of this. This is really the first meeting to start talking about this and to think about how we might get this into future capital plans of the city, and we would have to be applying for funds and so forth. So it would happen over several years, undoubtedly. Yes.
It looked like there was some consideration for electric, which I assume would also include cable and various other communications. What about wastewater, freshwater, gas, other utilities in terms of that corridor?
Do you want to answer that, John?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have not thought of that at all. But the way we try to do it in a perfect world, whenever we're ready to pave, we check out the condition of the existing sewer, water and sewer, and then we update it as we need. So this particular area, it would just be a matter of looking at the sewer to see if we have to upsize it for future development or anything like that. Off the top of my head, I don't know how old the water line is, but we have water and a sewer feed all the way to UFB. And then, I don't think it goes much past, I'd have to look about the water past that.
You come to the bridge after that.
Yeah, and you know what, I'm not sure if we have a hung water underneath the bridge. I don't think we do. So we'll look into that. Yeah, we'll look into that. So,
Probably catch it on Turkey Hill on the other side, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that might be a dead end from the other side. So, long story short, we will look at the utilities, and then that'll just be added as we need it.
Anyone else? Yes.
Is it possible to scale the project back a bit? You're talking about, you've got 1111 and a very small shoulder, and you're trying to grab basically 13 more feet, 4, 4, and 5-foot sidewalk. Maybe start with the sidewalk. I think pedestrians, cyclists, they cycle on the roadway anyway.
Well, I think the question, for those who couldn't hear it, is it possible to scale this back so we don't have to widen the road to the full 4, 11, 11, 4, 5? And I think the concern here has been for kids cycling to school. And having kids, adults can cycle on the road with no problem. But having kids cycle to school in the morning and the evening is, you really need to have separation of some sort. And so that's really what the idea is. And so it does add expense because you're adding paving and so forth. And also if you're adding the sidewalk, then you're adding a significant expense because that's adding the need for the stormwater drainage. But as John Eric said, the existing city right-of-way is fairly wide, and the plan that he's proposed is to try to keep it as narrow as possible while still providing space for kids to cycle on the road.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The difficulty with that, like off the top of my head, the minute you asked, I'm like, well, great idea. The problem with that is that a lot of times, if you were to design and build a sidewalk now, chances are, and do it in isolation, chances are when you do final design for the whole thing, you may have needed to raise the road from some unforeseen condition that you didn't anticipate prior. So what you try to do is design the road all at the same time, and then build it in different pieces. So if we design the whole road and we can build a sidewalk because we didn't need to raise it, and you just saw cut the existing pavement, put it in the sidewalk, drainage, happy day, the future will be built as your design, that could be fine. So it's one of those, you don't know until you do the design.
Yeah, okay.
Does a boardwalk make any sense as far as like saving costs or anything like that in certain sections rather than doing paving for a sidewalk? Or like wetland preservation or anything like that?
We looked at boardwalk a little bit, and talked about it some, but it really, it's maintenance, but it's also, then you also are creating, you're not solving any of the real problems, it's just, you're just adding something that probably requires more frequent maintenance. And as John already said, probably the whole thing can be done without affecting wetlands. Yes, back there.
Was there any thought given to adding additional lighting on stretches of that road that are very dark for a good portion of the year? One of the comments was, driving into work and seeing kids on bicycles and not being able to see them clearly. I know I cycle on that road, my wife's a runner, and there are some concerns about inadequate
That's a
lighting.
good point.
along
Yeah,
here.
we haven't looked at that, but it's a good point, and we'll add that to our list. And for those who couldn't hear, it was about whether there was any consideration given to lighting the street. Oh, yeah.
Last spring, there seemed to be, the water table was up, and there was Perry Way all the way up to Hale. There seemed to be some close to flooding issues. Has that, while it may not be a wetland, has some consideration looked at in terms of the flow of water as it comes off the roads to make sure they can flow past the road reasonably well?
Yeah, that's a great, another good question. So we did flood inundation mapping for the city. This particular area, we have to update some modeling because we have new information, blah, blah, blah. Once we do that, I suspect that the culverts, there's 2 culverts that cross here. I suspect that we're gonna have to enlarge them. We will have to enlarge them kind of quite a bit. So the unforeseen that is probably going to be very foreseen very soon will be raising the road even more. And those are the things with final design that really start shaking up.
Yes.
Are any of these projects that you're mentioning, projects this town has to do anyway? Could we capitalize on the reconstruction at that time?
Not that I know.
Not that we know of, no.
Do you guys know anything? Just the culverts. The Hale Street culvert by the pump station is, it's gonna need replacement soon, but that's still isolation. It's still small.
Right, yeah, there's nothing along the road.
Yeah.
There's a question way in the back, I think. Yes.
Is there a way to widen these streets beforehand? Do they play into, like we just talked about, the beta engineering plan? Is Hale Street on that list to be done? So could we widen these streets anyways without going down, just as to expedite it?
No, you can answer this. We'll look into it.
Okay.
I didn't look at the, he's talking about, we hired an engineering firm to do a pavement management program for us. And I'll be honest, I don't know where Hale Street is on that. So we can look at that. Yeah.
I think that's a great suggestion, if we could do a sort of a demonstration of what the road could look like. It could be sort of a temporary condition where you create the width, maybe it's not even fully paved all the way across, but you improve it enough on the shoulders, and you could even delineate where the sidewalk would be, show what the width of the potential shoulders would be, just so to sort of see how it works as a temporary condition. And
The only, as the more time goes on, the more I think, you're paying for it twice.
Yeah, and I don't think you'd want to spend, you have to look at how much it would cost to do that temporary condition, but I guess it'd be worth thinking about.
It's definitely worth thinking about, there's no doubt about it. But off the top of my head, if we scarify it and then pave it, and then come back within our lifetime, and we want it sooner, because we really want it now, then you end up paying for pavement twice.
Another way to look at that is if it's on the list. Anyway, and the city might be using its bond money to be doing some widening, then you might be able to get more money from a Safe Routes to School project to add the sidewalk. So that might be a way to stretch the city's money. Jen,
Did you want to go?
Yeah, I had a
go
question.
ahead, yeah.
Has, you said you've done some research and looked at other parts of the world that are using certain models for this. Has any research been done for similar sort of environmental and similar road conditions? I know that's, I don't know if you have a log or there's some research area that you can go to find samples of solutions from an engineering standpoint. I would guess that you might have some availability to research that a bit more for just.
Yeah, I think one of the just for starting to answer that question, you can pick up after me. I think this is really a pretty basic engineering problem right now because we're able to stay away from the wetlands. The big issue seems to be, once you add the sidewalk, the need to raise the pavement a little bit to get the separation from the road to the groundwater and so forth. Some of the examples that John Eric was talking about were things that are not in this plan. Things like those movable bollards, for example, that separate a shared use path from the vehicle path, or the idea of what they call an advisory bike lane, where you really narrow the road and make the bike lanes really wide. Those are things that are used in other places, but that just doesn't seem to make sense here. It's because of the, it shouldn't be because of the speed, because the speed limit is what it is. I have a slide that can show you what the actual speeds are, but it's really because of the volume of traffic, and then it really is the effective speed as well, combined with that. It really makes it, some of those more context-sensitive solutions are really not as appropriate for this road because you really need to separate the bicyclists from the traffic.
So I have a couple of questions, and I think it ties a lot of these questions together, right? So are you suggesting that the existing right-of-way will support a wider road right now?
Yes.
Okay. So if we remove the issue of curbing, right? Because with curbing comes an exponential cost of drainage, the curbing, material, plus material for the sidewalk. And we made a 30-foot wide road in the existing right-of-way. Can that happen and have a plan for that? And as part of the separation, we can get bollards or something to separate everything outside of 11.1 or 11.2 or something like that, right?
30 feet won't do it, though. 30 feet will give you the shoulder and the travel lane, but it won't give you a place for pedestrians to walk, because if you don't have a curb, you need to have more separation.
Okay, is that by law?
No, just because of safety. It's just to make it safe. It wouldn't be safe otherwise.
Okay, so we have,
But
so what is the right of way width that we have to play with?
it's 50?
I do not know. I mean,
If it's 30,
Yep.
right, if it's 30 and it fits into the existing right of way, then we can make this work. Adding curbing to this kills the project for the funding, okay? It's dead. There's no money for this, right? I'll just say it up now, right? I don't want to be the skunk at the picnic, but you can't.
No,
Right.
but there's ways to apply for that, or going to sidewalks.
Yeah, if we,
But
I think.
I know grants are great, but they're not guaranteed, right? And if we want to do this, there's a lot of people for grants that are out there, right? And I understand what you're saying. Here's the issue, right? We could, if we can support this within the right-of-way today, we could somehow figure this out in a short-term basis and any grant money would be gravy, okay? If we can't fit it into the right of way, then we have a problem already because it doesn't fit on the street, right? So my question is, how big is the right of way that we have to play with, that we don't have to take land, that we have as a playground that we can do our math with?
We'll have to find out. We'll have to find out what the right-of-way width is. A lot of roads, Jim, have variable width right-of-way.
Yeah.
It'd be 50 feet in a certain stretch, and then it bumps up to 60 in another stretch. This, I'm not even gonna guess what it is, but Rick was absolutely correct. This section right now works. If we do what you're proposing, which I'm not against, we need a better idea from this,
Okay,
okay? We need separation from this, that's what Rick was saying, the 30 feet.
I understand.
Yeah, and this is for everyone else,
Yeah,
this
no,
isn't for you.
I get it.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to separate it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But if we do a curb,
Yeah.
right, we got to raise the road, we got to
Cost
put in
of way.
drainage
Yeah.
and all that, right? So
Yeah.
if we don't need to put in drainage,
Yeah.
right, if we use the natural drainage that's there.
That's how I started this with
Yeah.
not having drainage. The last thing I wanted was drainage.
Okay.
So we asked these guys, they're like, we were psychotic of trying not to have drainage. But here's the problem. This area here, it's hard for this type of semi-urban landscape to,
Yeah, I get it.
but we need to think out of the box. We can put together a section of what that would look like, but it'd be a totally different look because, are you proposing sidewalks on both sides? What would the section be? And we can look at it.
Well, so.
But it'd be
if we-
11, you need 11, 11.
Right, so we need 30, so I'm looking at the top, right?
Yeah.
If we eliminate the 5-foot sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
And we have 30 feet right now, 15 and 15.
Yeah.
Right, and we do
Yeah.
11 and we create a separation of the 4 feet, right?
Yeah,
It's better than what we have now, which is nothing,
yeah.
right?
So it'd be a sidewalk on one side.
But sidewalk on both sides, we have 30 feet, there's no sidewalk. It's a shoulder, it's a 4-foot shoulder
Okay.
that's separated from the travel lane.
Can't the 4-foot shoulder be shared use for pedestrians and
Yeah,
cyclists?
that's what I'm going with, right? It's not necessarily ideal, but remember, we have tractor trailer trucks
Yeah.
that shouldn't be on that road that are on that road, right? And we have cars that are going 2 times the speed limit, not the speed limit on that road, right? And so when we talk about safety, the safety isn't separation as much as it is enforcement of our existing speed limits, right? So I don't know how safe it could be traveling 25 miles an hour with a separated bollard for 4-foot shoulder for my kid to ride to school than it is for somebody driving 55 miles an hour down Hale Street with a tractor trailer truck taking a left-hand turn and everybody's trying to swerve all over the road, right? So we've seen all of those examples I just said on that road every day, right? So my question is, if we want to put this through today, without grants, without funding, do we have enough room in the right-of-way to do a 4-foot, 11, 11, and a 4 and separate it? That's my question.
We can look at it, absolutely. I'm not closing the book, we can look at it. It gives me heartburn, because even with the 11, you need a shoulder for the vehicle. Put together, right now, we're talking about using shoulder for people. So then we would need like an 11 and a 2. Or maybe if it's mass TOT funded, it'll be 11-4. 4 was the minimum shoulder for a collector. So then you got your 11-4, and then we're adding a sidewalk on both sides.
Right.
So, off the top, and I'm not shutting you down, Jim, off the top of my head, yeah.
No,
You see how it starts spiraling? It a lot depends on the funding and.
I do.
Yeah.
But we have to have a plan before we get funding.
Yep.
Right? Because if we can't apply for a grant without a plan.
So what we'll do is we'll look at that new type of cross-section, we call it. We'll look at the new one and see how it can apply and see, we will get back to you whether we can do it or not.
Great.
And we owe you that, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So if you wanted to do your ideal situation, what do you think the estimated cost would be?
We don't have that yet. And we need, this is really, again, the first step. We want to get feedback so that we can understand how to proceed and then start to figure out what the cost would be.
I just think folks should appreciate how much it could actually
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some significant grants.
So I would recommend, I think the city needs to seriously consider putting some money into an engineering plan for this roadway so that we can have those answers, so that we don't continually go round and round on this conversation about what we can do in the interim, what we can do in the long term. If we had a plan, then we could have a short term, an interim plan, and we could have a long term plan, and we could go after funding. So I think investing in some engineering design that would involve some public input into what the ideal plan is would be really important for this project. And it would help us actually put some capital funding aside that is that is real money, that versus just saying it's gonna cost us $5 million and we'll never be able to do it.
Yeah, and again, the whole idea is that it doesn't have to all be done at once. It can be done, you can do it in phases, and you can have different solutions for different parts of the road. You know, as John Eric said, that first section up to Doe Run really needs to have a continuation of what there is from Squires Glen to Low Street. And so that just needs to go down, and that's already got drainage in there. It's not something that's a major change, whereas, you know, as you go further past Doe Run, then you're dealing with some of the issues that we're talking about in terms of drainage. Yes, way back there, Pat.
I'm curious about snow removal, because I'm assuming a shared use lane versus a sidewalk would have very different snow removal consequences, so how does that work?
Yeah, that turns into an operational cost. So you'd be treating the travel lane and if you did the sidewalk, you're treating the travel lane and the shoulder, you're just plowing it as you would a regular street. Once you get a separation of any kind, whether it's a vertical separation of a curb or a series of bollards, then you're dealing with different types of equipment.
But is it true that if it's the diagonal painted line kind of separation and then a shared use, even a two-way shared use lane, that could all be plowed?
It could all be flat, but that's the problem with the speeds on this road. You really want to have some type of vertical separation because
But right now we have nothing.
Yeah,
Right,
I'd rather have
right.
something.
I'd rather have something than nothing.
And I'm just
What we
concerned because
currently
if we have a
have.
sidewalk, there's no residents to be
Yeah.
shoveling that, so it could be covered in ice till May, which would be a huge bummer.
Yeah, I want to talk, hey guys, I want to talk about the speed though, right?
I want to address there, Rick, everything Rick said is
Yeah.
100% accurate. This is the biggest problem that we had internally going back and forth.
Yeah.
This is the center of the road. It slopes from the double yellow to the edge. We all know how roadways drain. This does not work for many reasons. Because this is where the snowbank is going to be. And you get a springtime rain and all that flow will get blocked by the snowbank. So, internally, we were poking around with super elevated the other way, so having the guardrail be the high point, having all that drain to the other side of the street, so that there's no blockage after a rain event in the winter, which does rain in the winter. So the super elevation doesn't work. Why? Because if you have a snowbank over here, when you plow the shared use, and you have a snowbank here, then you have all that snow melting and then freezing across the travelway. When you enter a highway and the ramp is super elevated, you'll see sheets of ice. Not a big deal because they put so much salt, it's not a problem. I don't know an engineer that will sign off on this, and I don't like the idea of super elevating that. So having this cross slope here, I don't know a DPW crew in America that will remove the snow between each guardrail post so the drainage can go through. That's why I don't like option 2 for many reasons. That's another one. That's a fantastic question because that's the fundamental problem that we have with finding something that works without curb. It's so hard because of the added width of asphalt that we're dealing with. Oh wait, Jim.
Yeah, so we keep talking about the speeds, right? So the speeds on both ends are 25 miles an hour. And the speed in the middle of the straightaway is down 35 miles an right? And if that was effectively enforced, that we wouldn't have the perceived safety issues of the separation that we're talking about.
I still disagree, because you still want to design it for reality, not whether the police are gonna enforce it. And we would, let's reverse it.
Yep.
Think of your kid. Okay, the police weren't there to keep the speed down, but your kid got hit because the guy was going 50. And you didn't have the right protection. I can't live with that. Me being the engineering department
Yeah,
that
well,
stamps it.
yeah, so the
So
counter,
technically, you're right, that we should
Yeah.
technically, you're right, you're absolutely right.
but the counter argument is, today, they've got 6 inches on the curb, they've got 6 inches on the fog line,
Yeah,
and that's all they have,
yeah.
right? So what I think a lot of people are trying to get to
Yeah.
is, how do we get to a 4-foot shoulder today on both sides of, outside of the fog line today, right? And there might be a longer-term plan for a different design and a different plan. But I got 6 inches on both sides of the fog line, if I have that, right? And how do I get to 4? And if the answer is I can fit in the right-of-way today, then I think you're gonna get support from it, right? You know, as you got, you know, we're not picking on your design, because I think it's a great design, right? And I think that it's great dialogue that we're having.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of things, and what I'm trying to advocate for is listen, if we have 30 feet in the right-of-way today, then we should present this, not from the citizens group, but to the city now, to be able to say, listen, if it's in the right-of-way, then we should add it to the beta list, and we should add it to a safety concern, and we should raise it as a priority. But if we don't have the right size in the right-of-way, then we have other issues and challenges, right, to present that, and we can't get there. And what I'm learning in my role, right, is that if you go to the perfect design, you can't afford it. Then you have to wait until your number's called on the grant list.
Yeah.
And right now I'm here, and I want to be here, right? And that's a problem.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And that's why we have so much anxiety of getting something that works on the cheap. And so, the best thing, everything you gave us is a lot for me to regurgitate. Come down to the office, and we need to look at it to make sure we understand exactly what you thought about.
Sure.
Because we want to make this work.
Yeah.
I want to do this for $2 million and not $8 million. You know what I mean? So, but it's going to be, once you start adding drainage, once you start adding curbing, all bets are off. You need drainage, then you need the height, then you bring in fill, and that just boom, boom, boom.
I think he's still pushing for just a simple widening. I think your number would be more like 34 than 30, because as you keep saying, that 2-foot shoulder is important.
Yeah.
With the size of the vehicles and
Yeah.
the speeds on the roadway.
Yeah.
Now, I think the number is more like 34, 4, 4, 2 and 2, and 11 and 11. Would be
Yeah,
uniform. But, I
and the
mean,
basic
we should
question
let
is, does it fit?
stormwater pitch the way it pitches today, like just, it's a simple widening with some striping.
Well, I think.
It's all, well, the simple widening is the easy part, it's all about where to put the sidewalk. Then that's the part that.
Yeah, I thought we lost the sidewalk about 15 minutes ago.
No, we don't want to lose the sidewalk.
Why? Because I'm a runner, and I'm gonna tell you something, the sidewalks in this city are crap, excuse my vulgarity. And I'm sick and tired of endangering myself to be forced off a sidewalk, which is not safe to run on, to have that man, you are absolutely right, that is one of the most dangerous roads I run, and I do 8 and 10 mile runs several times a week. Of all the city, that road is the worst.
Oh, yeah.
And you can turn around and you can say, is there a I want to know what the difference in price between having a wide, multi-use lane for cyclists and runners and people pushing baby carriages and children walking and everyone else, marked and designated appropriately, like they do all over Europe, which we see which works, and enforcing when they can the speed limit, not that they do. What is the difference between doing that and having that wideness, and then putting up more money? Is it costing more money to put up a sidewalk that rots away and nobody does anything about? I've complained about the speed limit. I complained about the
It's
speed
times
limit on
three, the number's
Turkey
times
Hill.
3.
And the problem with that is the police were good enough to come and manage it for a while. And while they were there, it slowed down. A week after they left, the huge trucks kept coming right back to Turkey Hill because they're flipping the bird saying, I can do anything I want, even though it says no trucks. And the speeders, especially at any time people are going to work, I have been almost hit and run off the road several times because they don't care. And they drive literally onto my side of the road. And one young woman yelled at me and said, well, I have to get to work. She's coming at me in my running lane, screaming at me that she has to get to work. I said, you better back off now. So this is not you are absolutely right. Listen to this man, because everything he said about Hale Street is absolutely dead on right. And I know you can't control the speeders, but if you're going to plan this, all I ask is a taxpayer and a resident, do it so it's multi-use. So a cyclist has as many rights as a runner and a child on a bike or anything else. And I know you have to look at cost, but do it right the first time and get it done right. So we're not here back in a few years saying, you know, it's a mess again.
Yeah, I absolutely totally agree. My biggest concern is the infamous stereotypical mom with baby carriage. The person with baby carriage, whoever is pushing the baby carriage. I worry about it. So, how to make that work without curb? I'm pulling my hair out. America's not ready for a separation. We will be open, I swear, we'll be open to look at it. I'll be pleasantly surprised if we can make something work without curbing, but have the ability of having the carriages way over on the side.
Well, the problem is,
I'm not against it, for it, but I hear you guys
you're not
want.
going to slow the traffic down. It's a responsibility of the drivers. It's up to them. And unfortunately, as you pointed out, sir, it oftentimes doesn't work. But you know what? I'm as important as anyone pushing a baby carriage, and they're just as important as anyone cycling and on and on and on.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone is equally as important to be safe on these roads, and we're all paying taxes. So all I'm asking is please consider doing it so it actually includes runners and cyclists in multi-use, as much as somebody pushing a baby carriage or a child going to school, who all have rights and should all be safe. But everything you said was right.
Thank you. Yes.
I have two questions. One, I'm not sure if it makes sense at all, but part of the reason why there's so much traffic on that street is some of the businesses in the business park and the nursing facilities and things like that. Is there any way we could obtain funding from any of those companies? And then my other question is, so what happens after today? Because I know this has been a project that's been discussed for a couple decades, and it always gets shelved and thrown to the bottom of the barrel. And now all of a sudden there's a little resurgence again. Is that what this is, just a little resurgence, and then it's just going to get tossed to the bottom of the barrel? Or what happens after today?
Well,
And I also want to say I'd be happy with a simple shoulder. I don't need perfect world scenarios, sidewalks. That would be nice, but considering there's absolutely nothing right now, anything is safer than what we currently have. So I take anything.
well, as the mayor said at the beginning, we volunteered to try to help move this along as a citizens group. We're not the city.
Yes, no, I realize
And
that.
so we're, the next steps I think will be kind of regrouping with the engineering staff and talking with them about options and how we move this forward and turning it into a project. And I think there may be several options that we have to consider. We look at the sidewalk option versus a wider road with a shared path and other things like that we can look at, compare and contrast what the benefits are, how wide the road has to be under each condition and so forth, and the cost of drainage, and see whether there are certain strategies that work for one part of the road versus another, and so forth. And, we don't have a schedule at this point. We just wanted to use this as a kickoff.
Rick, can I
Just a
add
second,
to
let
that?
me just finish answering your question. And to your first point about whether there's a way to get businesses to contribute, I don't know. We can try to look into it at this point. I just don't know.
Well, she's making a very good point, because the businesses are the ones bringing in all the particularly dangerous traffic, especially the trucks. And if you go into that industrial park, and I'm running and I'm seeing it in the morning or in the afternoon, a good majority of the traffic coming through that drive inappropriately are trucks and people going to and from that industrial park with all of those businesses. So why shouldn't they be at least asked to donate, to contribute in some way to cut down on the situation of being less dangerous, making it less dangerous?
Will be
I
something
think
we
that's
can
a
look
real
into.
good point. She made an excellent point.
So Rick, I just want to help on that, on the follow-up, right? So these guys are a citizens group that have sparked great conversation, and they do it in a number of different ways, and they spark us as counselors. So I'm the Ward 5 counselor. This is the Ward 5 counselor, Ward 4 counselor. That's the Ward 6 counselor. Sorry, Ward 3. And sitting next to her, him was a woman who just left, which is the Ward 4. So you've got Ward 3, 4, 5, and 6 here, who are, we're here because we're committed to trying to bring this from concept into reality, right? We don't know how we're going to do that yet, which is why I may have different questions and pointed questions than others, right? My ask is that, my answer to you is that we're going to try to keep this top of mind going forward, and we're looking at all different types of funding sources we can in terms of grants, in terms of part of the city commitment in bonding, et cetera, and getting it on the list. We also would be open to a public-private type of relationship, but we have to have a plan to be able to do that, right? And so these types of conversations are good. My point is, you've got kind of a commitment here from the councilors who surround Hale Street, that we're trying to do something. We know there's a problem here. I walk it every day, right? So I get it. And so I don't know that there's going to be immediate action like next week, but it's top of mind, and we're trying to make it done in this legislative year that we have, right? To at least have some sort of idea where we're going to go with this going forward.
Good.
Right? That's all I can say.
Yeah, that answers a lot of questions. Thank you.
Is there a point person or email set up for this to send information for some other areas, even in the United States, where they've done away with sidewalks and kind of leveled and created an equal shared space? So it's just through delineation of the land, so you can widen the space, which eliminates some of the costs. So I can definitely send some stuff.
Yeah, you can certainly contact us at Newburyport Livable Streets, and we can do some research for you on that. It depends on the kind of road and whether, the volumes and speeds.
She has examples to share with us.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, sure. That'd be great.
I mean, I don't know if it would be applicable given the
Yeah.
topography.
Sure.
So,
That'd be great.
it depends. A lot needs to go into the.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
If you, I thought you were asking for it. If
Yeah.
you're here.
Well,
Send them over.
I asked earlier to see if you had done anything, but I haven't really been.
Good, that'd be
Oh,
great.
yeah.
Take a look
Great.
at it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yes.
To address the speed issue, can speed bumps be added?
Not on the collector road. It can be done on local roads, but not on a collector road like this.
You guys mentioned by state law?
I don't know if it's by state law or by federal standards, I'm not sure.
It's safety action. It's just, at least for a collector road, it's not appropriate.
You could just speak a little bit louder, just give us
Purely by the classification, I mean, this is not, bureaucracy, it's a collector. The cars need to move. Local roads, you can put a speed bump, even locally you don't prefer to, but you can't put them on a collector. Whether we like it or not, this is a collector, guys, it's not a local road.
So you can't measure collector road one way on part of it either.
Anything's possible, but
Like say from,
it won't happen in our lifetime here, because
yeah,
there's too many, there's not enough parallel streets to create the flow that you would need to do the change in one way. Like you could, like Fruit Street and all those south end, yeah, you can do that all day long, reverse them and change them, but not here. Yeah.
Since Europe was mentioned as an example, and that's how they slow traffic down. They don't have a separate sidewalk for pedestrians. They have speed bumps.
Yep, and I've traveled over there, I just got back from Finland with my daughter for a week this last February. Picture after picture after picture. We went from Helsinki to Rovaniemi, which is the Arctic Circle, all the way up. Bike paths on the side of the highway, all the way up. You could do a bike path from the Arctic Circle to Helsinki, and it's like 1,000 miles. It's insane. We are so far behind, it's not even funny. This has too many different sections where anything that we want to do that's European, there's too many sections. Because you got the urban downtown by Squires Glen, right? And the open pasture is kind of what you're talking about. You do that would be perfect for the open pasture. Open it up. Rick wanted to look into a gravel walk behind the ditch in the pasture and do that. Yeah, I mean, you could, but then you're buying the private property's land. But otherwise, it's a fine idea. But what happens is it's only a fine idea for about 500 feet. And then before that and after that, you're back to reality. So European ideas can only last, they can only go so far on this road.
So, yeah, I guess that wasn't in reality, is that what you were saying?
Oh, wait. As far as that ditch?
Yeah. That's okay.
You
He's
can,
the engineer.
well, you gotta buy the land. I mean, you can do it, but you gotta buy the land.
Yes.
I was wondering, so it sounded like some people were interested in just widening the road, and so if say we did just the 4 feet widening, is there any restriction as to what could be installed afterwards? Like, would it make it harder if, say, we decided we paved the 4 feet and then later wanted to add a 5-foot curve? Would it be hard to do that afterwards because with the roads be different heights or whatever?
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, you could theoretically do it, but again, as John Eric said, once you think about a sidewalk, then you're talking about raising the road and so forth. So you really, as he said, you'd be paying for it twice, really.
Are there any restrictions, you guys mentioned conservation a while back, but you keep saying right of way. When does that come into play? How much is that coming, and is that, are those state laws?
So the right of way is what the city owns for the road.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah, and so in some places, that right of way actually does cross into wetlands, but it looks like, from the preliminary work that the engineering department has done, it looks like the right of way is so wide, you could get either of these plans in, fit them in, and skirt the wetlands. So it looks like that's not going to be an issue in most places. There might be that one place where you have the pocket wetlands where there might be a possibility of dealing with that. But they're both, so the right-of-way is the area that we have to work with, and it might be 50 to 60 feet wide. And in most places, that's not constrained by the wetlands. But there might be a couple places where we have to, go for some special approvals to do something in those areas. And there would be mitigation and so forth. Yes?
So just thinking about the consideration of the school buses, the way the town does it, the city does it, is that if you're under 2 miles to the school, you have to pay for the bus. That extends all the way up Hale Street into La Valley, to the corner of La Valley and Francis. So what we're asking families to do is to either pay for the bus, right, or not give them an alternative to walk to school, because there's no viable way to get there. So thinking about just that regulation and those conversations, if you're asking to pay for the bus, you have to give that family an alternative, which would be to walk to school, yet we're not providing them a safe way to walk to school. So does that put it a little bit higher on the priority of safety, safe schools, all of that?
Yeah, well, I think that the
$300 a kid.
Yeah, all the way up to,
And that's not just true. On Virginia, there's a section that has to pay as well.
Yeah.
Virginia, Storybrooke.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really what one of the reasons we're focusing on this road is really trying to figure out how to make it a safer way for kids to walk to school.
right, I know, I'm just talking about the pressing issue, right? If I'm a family that says,
Well,
my alternative, maybe not in the dead of winter, right, I'll figure something out, but what my preference is, I'm not gonna spend that $300, I'd like to walk my kid all of fall, all of spring. I'm not really afforded that opportunity,
Right.
the city still does not have to pay, so I'm not feel like there's a real conflict of us as a city asking for that $300 when we're not providing the opportunity.
Well, I get that. I think that we really need to look at that. It's how we raise the priority of this improving this road. However, whatever the improvement project is, raising the priority is, you know.
And does that help us get more priority for money from the state? Because sometimes there's funding streams associated with those sorts of rules.
I couldn't hear what you said.
There might be a funding stream associated with that rule, because there's a rule at the state level.
Yeah, I don't think it's a funding source associated with the rule, but that's where the whole Safe Routes to School
Yeah, so
program.
That's where that money
Yeah, so
comes from,
Safe Routes
right?
to School
Yeah.
is a dwindling pot of money, but it is one of the options that we could look into. But the challenge we have is we don't have a design. So what we're asking for is sort of nebulous. It's like we want to make it better, but we don't really know what we want to do. So that's why I keep pushing. If we can have a design, there are these pots of money that maybe collaboratively would help us. And I think you guys have a really good point about the fact that, you know, this should be a priority for the city, regardless of where the money comes from. And I think your counselors are listening, and they agree. So I think that's one of the reasons we also wanted to have this meeting, was so that we keep this discussion in everybody's mind, if we don't forget about it, because that happens. So I think those are really good arguments for why we would go after different pots of money, for those very reasons. That these are safety issues, these are livability issues, these are health issues, and yeah, it's an equity issue.
Just to add on to that a little bit, another way to stay informed is to either follow us either on our email list or Facebook and come to our meetings. You know, the more people we get involved in this and get behind it, then the better we'll be able to have you know, some momentum. And we have that sign-up list for our email list back behind there.
Mr. White, again, is there a version of the top option there where we lose the sidewalk and we add buffers between your 4-foot, hopefully multi-use areas, so that we don't need those silly stanchions which everyone sees just get mowed down and broken, you know, they're ridiculous anyway. Is there a version of that where if we don't have the sidewalk, we do a simple widening, the water pitches the same, you know, the water runs the same way it does today?
Yep.
With the, you know, and add the buffers between hopefully multi-use water.
Yeah, and that's where we could do like a mixed-use gravel path, inexpensive, behind anything to do with roadway, just get it out of the way. So the section by the pasture, so we could have a traditional sidewalk here, and then put that path back here. That's what I was joking about not being reality. The reality part I meant to mean is it's not in the right of way, so then you have to buy land. If the right of way is there, your idea of separating and keeping it way out of the way has to be somewhere here, but that's where the ditch is. So we can move the ditch onto the private property owners, but we're taking land away from them. The bottom line is that whatever we push out is someone's gonna have to pay for something. Land, allow a private landowner to allow us to do
For
it.
a short run, can't you just cross the street? I mean, we've seen that in neighborhoods, right? I mean, there's a sidewalk on one side and it stops and you cross the street and then there's a sidewalk on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, obviously ideally you don't wanna do a switch over halfway. Mid-block crosswalks are dangerous, but that shouldn't prevent us from looking into it. At the end of the day, wherever you put it, it's gonna be extra wide, and that's our challenge. But we can look at that, and that's all part of what Jim was saying. Try to do it, widen the road, keep everything separate, no curb, no drainage, let's make it happen. Yeah, we can look at that. It's the other sections that here, we can't do that idea here. Well, maybe we should think out of the box. I mean, we could theoretically put a meandering path in the.
Hey, John.
I mean, we could do that, but I mean, yeah.
Because if you look at this, theoretically, the right of way is, right-of-way is way back there, right? Theoretically.
Yeah.
So that there's plenty of room to move it back. It just
It's
encroaches on what people see as their front lawns, even if you're staying in the right-of-way. So we're trying not to do that. We're trying to limit the amount of widening that we do.
What is the measurement from the actual right-of-way to the opposite right-of-way?
Well, if you look at this cross-section here is the 35 and a half feet, is that what that was?
Yeah.
So that's 35 and a half feet, so it looks like it's a 60-foot right-of-way.
Substantial amount of.
It's a substantial right-of-way, yeah. I mean, even when you get in, realistically, even when you get down by the meadow, it's not that, it's pretty wide. So, and we don't want to use all the right-of-way, because, people.
Maybe on the south side.
Yeah. So, but there is plenty of room to get that 35 and a half foot width into the right-of-way.
Just do a meandering sidewalk.
You can do that, yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. We just did that on Spofford Street, and the same thing came up, whether to do drainage. And finally, we put in the meandering sidewalk, and it's working, seems to be working, you know. Yeah, no, I'm not against that.
Yes.
Sorry, just one last
Go ahead, Paul.
comment, because we're talking about design, right? We have to have a design. I would just say, can you please give lots of thought to sustainability? We are not a town that maintains things very well, and crumbling sidewalks and overgrown weeds in a lovely gravel path are not going to get handled. So as lovely as asphalt looks, at least it's plowable and it generally holds up a little better. Because it'll be a bummer to spend all this money, time, and effort and then have the thing in shambles in 10 years.
Good point. Well, that looks,
Actually, I have a quick
oh yes, Heather.
Who over here knows what 18-wheelers are coming down Hale Street going into the business park? Because, I mean, I would have thought most would be going down Scotland Road, or should have been going down Scotland Road.
They're coming down Turkey, hitting the
But
GPS now.
What company?
Doesn't matter right now, because GPS is sending them all down. They're
Okay.
coming off
Okay.
95, coming south, and they're taking a right, and they're going to Turkey Hill, and they're coming down Turkey Hill, which is not built for that road.
Right.
There should be any of them beyond Cabot, heading west.
And
Right,
and then
I
they're,
mean,
and then
we
they're
should
going
have-
to
We should have
UPF.
restrictions on that road, period. I mean, why
We-
wouldn't we have some sort of,
We
no
just-
18-wheelers on this road?
We just filed
Yeah,
that.
no, this comes up in our TSAC meeting, Traffic Safety Advisory Group. And it's being looked at, worked on, it's been worked on, it's been looked at. Wayne, before he left, the deputy director, contacted Mass Highway and had everything arranged, something happened. I don't have a status, but keep coming to the TSAC.
I'll tell you, it's a new issue that
Speaking of
Council Lane
GPS.
and I just sponsored to send it back to TSAC because it's not acceptable to the residents of Turkey Hill.
Yeah, because I honestly, I sit in the meetings, but I'm not following that absolutely to the T, because I don't know when Mass Highway got notified and when they didn't.
We're gonna reopen it again.
You should, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For this and other reasons, but
Yeah.
it.
No,
we
trucks
talk
don't-
about sa- we
trucks
talk
do
about
not belong
safety
on there.
and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on, so we reopened it, I don't know where it's gonna go.
Sometimes we don't have control over
Right.
Google Maps.
Right.
If Google Maps sends it down there, and the trucker's gonna go down there, you can't have a police guy, then once they get there, you can't turn them around. So it's really hard. You give them a ticket, the next guy is gonna be a brand new guy or gal, and it's gonna be a different company, and then it's